Roswell, Alien Interview, Chapter 7, A Lesson in Ancient History. Matilda O'Donnell McElroy, Personal Note. My instruction with Airl continued through the night until dawn of the next morning. I must say that I was fascinated, skeptical, shocked, alarmed, dismayed, and disgruntled by the lesson I was getting from Airl. I could never have imagined any of what she was telling me, not even in my wildest dreams and nightmares. The next afternoon, after I had slept, showered, and eaten, I was debriefed about my interview session the previous evening by members of the gallery who recorded my account of what Airl told me. There was a stenographer present for the session as usual, to whom I debriefed after each interview, and there were also 6 or 7 men who asked for clarification of my statements. As always, there was constant pressure applied to me to use my influence with Airl to persuade her to answer specific questions prompted by members of the gallery. I did my best to reassure everyone that I would give my very best efforts to do so. Nevertheless, only 3 things happened every day thereafter. Airl resolutely refused to answer any questions that she sensed had been posed by or suggested to me by the gallery. 2. Airl continued to instruct me in the subject matter of her own choice. 3. Every evening after my interview with or instruction from Airl, she would give me a new list of subject matter about which she wanted more information. Each evening I presented this list to the gallery. The next day Airl received a large stack of books, magazines, articles, and so forth. She would study all of these during the night while I slept. This pattern repeated every day during the remainder of the time I spent with her. The subject matter of my next interview or lesson from Airl continued with a brief history of Earth, our solar system, and nearby space from the perspective of the domain. Official transcript of interview, top secret. Official transcript of the U.S. Army Air Force Roswell Army Airfield 509th Bomb Group. Subject Alien Interview, July 25, 1947, first session. Before you can understand the subject of history, you must first understand the subject of time. Time is simply an arbitrary measurement of the motion of objects through space. Space is not linear. Space is determined by point of view of an ISB when viewing an object. The distance between an ISB and the object being viewed is called space. Objects or energy masses in space do not necessarily move in a linear fashion. In this universe, objects tend to move randomly or in a curving or cyclical pattern, or as determined by agreed-upon rules. History is not only a linear record of events, as many authors of Earth history books imply, because it is not a string that can be stretched out and marked like a measuring tool. History is a subjective observation of the movement of objects through space, recorded from the point of view of a survivor rather than those who succumbed. Events occur interactively and concurrently, just as the biological body has a heart that pumps blood while the lungs provide oxygen to the cells, which reproduce using energy from the sun and chemicals from plants at the same time as the liver strains toxic wastes from the blood and eliminates them through the bladder and the bowels. All of these interactions are concurrent and simultaneous. Although time runs consecutively, events do not happen in an independent linear stream. In order to view and understand the history or reality of the past, one must view all the events as part of an interactive whole. Time can also be sensed as a vibration, which is uniform throughout the entire physical universe. Airl explained that ISBs have been around since before the beginning of the universe. The reason that they are called immortal is because a spirit is not born and cannot die, but exists in a personally postulated perception of is, will be. She was careful to explain that every spirit is not the same. Each is completely unique in identity, power, awareness, and ability. The difference between an ISB like Airl and most of the ISBs inhabiting bodies on Earth is that Airl can enter and depart from her doll at will. She can perceive at selective depths through matter. Airl and other officers of the domain can communicate telepathically. Since an ISB is not a physical universe entity, it has no location in space or time. An ISB is literally immaterial. They can span great distances of space instantly. They can experience sensations more intensely than a biological body without the use of physical sensory mechanisms. An ISB can exclude pain from their perception. Airl can also remember her identity, so to speak, all the way back into the dim mists of time for trillions of years. She says that the existing collection of suns in this immediate vicinity of the universe have been burning for the last 200 trillion years. The age of the physical universe is nearly infinitely old, but probably at least 4 quadrillion years since its earliest beginnings. Time is a difficult factor to measure as it depends on the subjective memory of ISBs, and there has been no uniform record of events throughout the physical universe since it began. As on Earth, there are many different time measurement systems defined by various cultures, which use cycles of motion and points of origin to establish age and duration. The physical universe itself is formed from the convergence and amalgamation of many other individual universes, each of which were created by an ISB or group of ISBs. The collision of these illusionary universes commingled and coalesced and were solidified to form a mutually created universe. Because it is agreed that energy and forms can be created but not destroyed, this creative process has continued to form an ever-expanding universe of nearly infinite physical proportions. Before the formation of the physical universe, there was a vast period during which universes were not solid, but wholly illusionary. You might say that the universe was a universe of magic illusions, which were made to appear and vanish at the will of the magician. In every case, the magician was one or more ISBs. Many ISBs on Earth can still recall vague images from that period. Tales of magic, sorcery, and enchantment, fairy tales and mythology speak of such things, although in very crude terms. Each ISB entered into the physical universe when they lost their own home universe. That is, when an ISB's home universe was overwhelmed by the physical universe, or when the ISB joined with other ISBs to create or conquer the physical universe. On Earth, the ability to determine when an ISB entered the physical universe is difficult for 2 reasons. 1, the memory of ISBs on Earth have been erased, and 2, ISB's arrival or invasion into the physical universe took place at different times, some 60 trillion years ago, and others only 3 trillion. Every once in a short while, a few million years, an area or planet will be taken over by another group of ISBs entering into the area. Sometimes they will capture other ISBs as slaves. They will be forced to inhabit bodies to perform menial or manual work, especially mining mineral ores on heavy gravity planets such as Earth. Airl says that she has been a member of the Domain Expeditionary Force for more than 625 million years. When she became a pilot for a biological survey mission, which included occasional visits to Earth. She can remember her entire career there and for a very long time before that. She told me that Earth scientists do not have an accurate measuring system to gauge the age of matter. They assume that because certain types of materials seem to deteriorate rather quickly, such as organic or carbon-based matter, that there is a deterioration of matter. It is not accurate to measure the age of stone based on the measurement of the age of wood or bone. This is a fundamental error. Factually, matter does not deteriorate. It cannot be destroyed. Matter can only be altered in form, but it is never truly destroyed. The domain has conducted a periodic survey of the galaxies in this sector of the universe since it developed space travel technologies about 80 trillion years ago. A review of changes in the complexion of Earth revealed that mountain ranges rise and fall, continents change location, the poles of the planet shift Ice caps come and go, oceans appear and disappear, rivers, valleys, and canyons change. In all cases the matter is the same. It is always the same sand. Every form and substance is made of the same basic materials which never deteriorates. Matilda O'Donnell McElroy, personal note. I cannot even begin to imagine how advanced a civilization may have become technically and mentally after trillions of years. Just think of how advanced our own country has become compared to only 150 years ago. Only a few generations ago, transportation was on foot, horseback, or boat. Reading was done by candlelight, heating and cooking were done over a fireplace, and there wasn't any indoor plumbing. Official transcript of interview. Airl described the abilities of an ISB officer of the domain to me, and she demonstrated one to me when she contacted telepathically a communications officer of the domain who was stationed in the asteroid belt. The asteroid belt is composed of thousands of broken-up pieces of a planet that once existed between Mars and Jupiter. It serves as a good low-gravity jumping-off point for incoming spacecraft traveling toward the center of our galaxy. She requested that this officer consult information stored in the files of the domain concerning the history of Earth. She asked the communications officer to feed this information to Airl. The communications officer immediately complied with the request. Based on the information stored in the files of the domain, Airl was able to give me a brief overview of our history lesson. This is what Airl told me that the domain had observed about the history of Earth. She told me that the domain expeditionary force first entered into the Milky Way galaxy very recently, only about 10,000 years ago. The first action was to conquer the home planets of the Old Empire. This is not the official name, but a nickname given to the conquered civilization by the domain forces, that served as the seat of central government for this galaxy and other adjoining regions of space. These planets are located in the stars systems in the tail of the Big Dipper constellation. She did not mention which stars exactly. About 1,500 years later, the domain began the installation bases for their own forces along the path of invasion which leads towards the center of the galaxy and beyond. About 8,200 years ago, the domain forces set up a base on Earth in the Himalaya Mountains near the border of modern Pakistan and Afghanistan. This was a base for the battalion of the Domain Expeditionary Force, which included about 3,000 members. They set up a base under or inside the top of the mountain. The mountain top was drilled into and made hollow to create an area large enough to house the ships and personnel of that force. An electronic illusion of the mountain top was created to hide the base by projecting a false image from inside the mountain against a force screen. The ships could then enter and exit through the force screen, yet remain unseen by Homo sapiens. Shortly after they settled there, the base was surprised by an attack from a remnant of the military forces of the old empire. Unbeknownst to the domain, a hidden underground base on Mars, operated by the old empire, had existed for a very long time. The domain base was wiped out by a military attack from the Mars base, and the ISBs of the Domain Expeditionary Force were captured. You can imagine that the domain was very upset about losing such a large force of officers and crew, so they sent other crews to Earth to look for them. Those crews were also attacked. The captured ISBs from the domain forces were handled in the same fashion as all other ISBs who have been sent to Earth. They were each given amnesia, had their memories replaced with false pictures and hypnotic commands, and sent to Earth to inhabit biological bodies. They are still a part of the human population today. After a very persistent and extensive investigation into the loss of their crews, the domain discovered that Old World Empire has been operating a very extensive and very carefully hidden base of operations in this part of the galaxy for millions of years. No one knows exactly how long. Eventually the spacecraft of the Old Empire forces and the domain engaged each other in open combat in the space of the solar system. According to Airl, there was a running battle between the Old Empire forces and the Domain until about 1235 AD, when the Domain forces finally destroyed the last of the spacecraft of the Old Empire force in this area. The Domain Expeditionary Force lost many of its own ships in this area during that time also. About 1,000 years later, the old Empire base was discovered by accident in the spring of 1914 A.D. History of Earth, our solar system, and nearby space from the perspective of the domain. Official transcript of interview, top secret. Official transcript of the U.S. Army Air Force Roswell Army Airfield 509th Bomb Group. Subject alien interview, July 25, 1947, first session. Before you can understand the subject of history, you must first understand the subject of time. Time is to answer specific questions prompted by members of the gallery. I did my best to reassure everyone that I would give my very best efforts to do so. Nevertheless, only 3 things happened every day thereafter. Airl resolutely refused to answer any questions that she sensed had been posed by or suggested to me by the gallery. 2. Airl continued to instruct me in the subject matter of her own choice. 3. Every evening after Roswell, Alien Interview, Chapter 7, A Lesson in Ancient History. Matilda O'Donnell McElroy, Personal Note. My instruction with Airl continued through the night until dawn of the next morning. I must say that I was fascinated, skeptical, shocked, alarmed, dismayed, and disgruntled by the lesson I was getting from Airl. I could never have imagined any of what she was telling me, not even in my wildest dreams and nightmares. The next afternoon, after I had slept, showered, and eaten, I was debriefed about my interview session the previous evening by members of the gallery who recorded my account of what Airl told me. There was a stenographer present for this session as usual, to whom I debriefed after each interview, and there were also 6 or 7 men who asked for clarification of my statements. As always, there was constant pressure applied to me to use my influence with Airl to persuade her, after my interview with or instruction from Airl, she would give me a new list of subject matter about which she wanted more information. Each evening I presented this list to the gallery. The next day Airl received a large stack of books, magazines, articles, and so forth. She would study all of these during the night while I slept. This pattern repeated every day during the remainder of the time I spent with her. The subject matter of my next interview or lesson from Airl continued with a brief